This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Lotierzo, former fighter, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by former 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association, Jack Hirsch. Jack, how are you tonight?
Good. The Boxing Writers Association of America, even though they're members.
I was going to throw that in, Jack, but it's a little too tongue-twisty for me.
Listen, let's get right to the fights, Frank. You bought the pay-per-view show. You spent Frank Lotierzo's hard-earned money, and you got a good fight. You got a good main event. So were you satisfied, Frank? Was it worth it to you?
Jack, no regrets at all. You know what I was thinking? I was thinking when I was watching the Benavidez Plant fight about Crawford and Spence, Fury and Usyk, maybe Beterbiev and Bivol, and some of the fights that have fans watering at the mouth to see. And I'm thinking, Benavidez and Plant is a level below them, and even though Benavidez was the favorite, he wasn't a given to win, and it was an exciting fight. And I was just thinking that there's just nothing better than boxing when you have elite guys fighting each other at the right time. Now, those guys, Benavidez and Plant, you can make a case after Canelo, they're the next tier of super middleweights, and now Plant's eliminated.
No, they're not. Plant never was, Frank. He never was. Plant's a fighter with skills. Plant's a fighter with a lot of heart. Plant is arguably the best gatekeeper in all of boxing, but he's not an all-star per se. You know what he's like? Let's compare it to basketball. He's like a really good sixth man. And the reason he's not in the starting lineup is there's a reason he's a sixth man. Okay? Plant is a good, solid fighter. But he's not elite, anywhere close to being elite. He can give you a few good rounds. And by the way, Frank, both you and I practically predicted this fight perfectly. So we didn't underestimate Plant. We both thought he'd win some of the early rounds, okay?
But I did say Ramirez wasn't going to stop him.
And Benavidez, you mean?
Benavidez was not going to stop him.
Yeah, I thought Benavidez would stop Plant late in the 11th round. He would start his charge around round 7, wear him out, and
that happened.
Kudos to Plant. Showed a lot of heart, a lot of smarts by holding and getting away with it, but he survived. So to me, Plant's stock actually went up a little bit.
Okay, Jack.
Where I had him before. Okay.
Here's where I disagree. As far as Plant and the food chain, Canelo is the top of the food chain. I'm not sure, besides Benavidez and Canelo, if there are any other super welterweights or super middleweights I would pick to beat Plant. Here's what I do know. Canelo is a generational talent, okay? And when they fought, I don't think he had shown any signs of decline. So to me, he got a prime Canelo, and he took him to the 11th round. He fights Benavidez, who everybody loves, and we hear about all his great talent, and he's the monster. And you know what? For 6 rounds, it was a real fight. And Benavidez, as hard as he tried, he couldn't get rid of him. So I think, and I think Plant was in great shape. I think he showed he belongs there. And I was thinking after the fight, was I more impressed with Benavidez or Plant? Like, as you just said earlier, like, who gained a little bit more? I come away, Jack, thinking a tad less of Benavidez. And I think of Plant, and I think he belongs maybe a little bit more than I thought.
That's fair, Frank. And for the most part, I think along the lines that you do. Going into this fight, I thought Benavidez would be more of a threat to Canelo than I do now. I still think he might beat Canelo. He might beat Canelo now, because I'll disagree with you on this point. I think the Canelo is a fighter that's at least slightly in decline. And
I can see after the Golovkin fight, Jack, I agree.
Right. The last 3 rounds against a 40-year-old Golovkin who offered virtually nothing the first 9 rounds. He was a shell of himself.
Agreed.
The idea that Canelo fought so poorly the last 3 rounds in comparison to what he did earlier kind of is a little bit of a red flag to me. But I do think Plant gained a little bit in this fight. And is it an insult to call a fighter a high-end gatekeeper? Because there's so few elite guys. I'll give you an example. You're saying the amount of junior middleweights. Jamal Charlo, the Charlo with an A, Jamal, he's a middleweight. He moves up to super middleweight. I could see him being matched with Plant. They're both promoted by Al Heyman's PCB.
Be a great fight.
Well, but Charlo would beat Plant. Do you have any serious doubts about that fight? If Charlo is himself, he's been somewhat inactive.
If he's the same guy he was the last time out, yes, I would make Charlo the favorite. I don't know if he would stop him, but I think it would be a competitive fight.
But that's it. Plant is good enough to give anyone a competitive fight, the elite guys, but he's not going to beat any of the elite guys. Look, the difference in gatekeepers, a heavyweight who won a semi-meaningful fight a couple of weeks ago, Carlos Takam, who beat Tony Yoka, over in France. He's a low-level gatekeeper, but he's a gatekeeper, He's been in with good guys. He's lost. And a gatekeeper normally means if you can't beat him, you're not an elite guy yourself. You're not a true top-of-the-line fighter. But if you beat him, now you could be in the discussion to fight the top guys.
But, Jack, here's where I see that a little different, even though I think in theory you're right. But don't the guys at the top get any credit? If Canelo is a generational fighter, and if he's signed to fight Benavidez right now, it might be a 50-50 fight. And from what I've read, more fans would pick Benavidez than they would Canelo. And Plant hung in there with both of them. They just both happen to be elite. Benny Briscoe had title shots against Valdez and Monzon. He never got the title, but people forget how great Valdez and Monzon were. So it's almost like Jack in football, that the team that wins the Super Bowl, they get too much credit, and the team that loses, they get crapped on. We're like, guess what? Somebody has to win. And if the Chiefs are so great, don't all over the Eagles because they didn't win if the Chiefs are so great. And that's my point. Like, some guys say, oh, George Foreman can't box. Well, if he can't box a lick, why do we give Ali credit for beating him? Do you see what I'm saying, though? The loser is always lessened.
Frank, you should hope your buddy Russell Peltz isn't listening. For you to compare Caleb Plant to Benny Briscoe.
I'm not, Jack, that's not the comparison I'm making. It's not.
I know, but the point is, in this day and age, Caleb Plant hasn't really beaten a top-of-the-line guy. He's beaten guys who basically
other than Yukazi, or however you pronounce his name. But, Jack, he hung in there with the elite guys. And let me just say this about the fight. There was a lot of talk about game plans and Plant having a plan B and C. And I actually think they had a good game plan. I like the strategy of extending the jab, slowing the fight down, flurrying when Benavidez was unsure, clinching and keeping him guessing. The problem is, Jack, when everybody talks about game plans and things like that, no matter what anybody says, boxing is a physical sport. And at the end of the day, the difference in that fight was mainly Benavidez' physicality, where Plant couldn't really get his attention with his power, couldn't make him do anything he wanted to do. But while he was strong and he had all his energy, his X's and O strategy was working until he got a little tired, wound down, and that's when Benavidez came on. So I give Plant and his team credit for having a good game plan. I don't think they could have done any better than they did. I think the better guy won the fight. And when I come away from that fight, this is what I see. Benavidez is good. He has holes in his game. I heard Plant's corner saying he doesn't like to get fainted. I picked up on that. They're right. He's not the one-shot, life-taking puncher that they make him out to be. If you compare Canelo and Benavidez against Plant, Canelo, once he gripped Plant with some really clean shots, he pretty much broke him down and stopped them, where Benavidez really beat on him really good and never really was close to stopping other than the bleeding.
Let's cut to the chase. We both agree Plant's stock went up a little bit in this fight. It went up a little bit. Okay? So
Jack, again, agreed. He was in great condition, and he showed he had heart.
Let's talk about Benavidez, because he's really the story. He won. The goal of Benavidez was to put the pressure on Canelo, where there would be a public demand that Canelo fight Benavidez. Okay, and the way to do it would have been to look more impressive against Plant than Canelo did.
But he did win convincingly. That should be enough.
But not to the general public, because Canelo could say, well, I stopped Plant. You went the distance with him. You never knocked Plant down. You know, and Benavidez needed to make a statement. Dominate Plant, stop him before Canelo. Now, if he calls Canelo out, people are going to want to see the fight, because a lot of them would be picking Benavidez. But now the average fan out there, even any average boxing person, it's hard to pick Benavidez. Some will. I might even, if they fight. Maybe I'll pick Benavidez, maybe Canelo. Let them sign first, and then I'll analyze it more. But he didn't make the statement. But I will say this for Benavidez. He handled it like a real pro, very smart at the post-fight press conference. Rather than insult Canelo and just turn Canelo off, he said about Canelo, no, he's a great champion.
I respect him, right?
I respect him. He has other options. And, you know, and sometimes that's the approach fighters should take. Now, Canelo might be thinking, yeah, I'll fight him rather than get turned off. Because I know if I want to get back at a guy, if I don't like a guy, I'm not going to get in the ring with him and reward him with a big payday, a big opportunity. I'll say screw him. It happened that way in England with Ricky Hatton and the fighter Junior Witter. Junior Witter kept insulting Ricky Hatton when they were on the way up the whole time. Wouldn't stop. And Hatton had the big name. Hatton got back at Witter by never fighting him. And Witter's career never quite fully took off because of that.
Jack, you just reminded me of something. I don't know if you remember this, but Muhammad Ali, when George Foreman was champ, he told Foreman, if you fight Ken Norton before I rematch him, I will never fight you. And you can't make any money. You may have the title, but you can't make any money without me, because Ali did not want Foreman to have a win over Norton until he did. I agree with you. I think that Benavidez handled things well, and I think the goal was achieved. He won the fight convincingly. The only thing negative I'll say about Benavidez is I saw in that fight, he doesn't know how to cut the ring off that great, although against Canelo he may not have to. I'm not sure he's improved, but at the end of the day, Jack, I think he achieved what he wanted to do, that the fight at 168 right now has to be Canelo and Benavidez. And to me, the only pass Canelo gets if he doesn't fight him is after he fights Ryder, is if he fights Bivol in a rematch at 175. If he takes that fight at 175, I can't kill him.
He might fight the guy. Canelo might fight Edgar Berlanga. Let me tell you something. Caleb Plant would beat Edgar Berlanga. And I'm going to go a step further. Caleb Plant would beat this 41-year-old version, I think, of Gennady Golovkin. I just want to backtrack a little for those who think I'm trashing Caleb Plant, because I'm not, okay? I'm just being a realist as far as certain abilities go. But
Right.
yeah, there was another fight this weekend. Of somewhat note, Jose Ramirez against Richard Kami. A good win for Ramirez, stopping Kami in the 11th round with a body shot. You know what I liked about that, what Kami did? He could have gotten up, but it was a tough physical fight, and he pulled the plug on himself. You want to know why? Because most of the time, the cornermen act like fans. They're so into winning that they don't look out for the safety of the fighter. They claim they care about the fight, and maybe they do, but they're not professional enough the way Angelo Dundee used to be to stop fights. And the ringside physicians, I hate to say this, Frank, because for 10 years, believe it or not, I was a vice president on the American Association of Professional Ringside Physicians. I'd be meeting in the board meetings, everything, a non-physician.
Right.
The doctors today, they're borderline incompetent at times, not pulling guys out in the corner, and fighters are getting hurt.
Jack, and Comey only loses to elite guys. I think Ramirez had a good night. I would love to see him fight Josh Taylor again or Regis Prograis. And before we leave the Benavidez Plant fight, we have to address the elephant in the room. Kenny Bayless did a horrible job. I never saw as much excessive holding in different spots of a fight, and a fighter not even being warned, Jack. It was like he was almost pulling for Plant. It was horrible.
But no. I'll play a little bit devil's advocate. The holding at times seemed to be a little excessive. I won't argue that point with you, Frank.
I don't think there's any seam about it, Jack. I think it was incompetent.
Fighters are allowed to clinch. Now, is there a difference to you between holding and clinching?
When I drop low and I wrap my hands around your waist and you can't do anything, I think that there's a problem there, and I think that's going outside. I know it's part of his strategy, but it was done too much, and Bayless's incompetence hurt the fight. Maybe Benavidez gets a stoppage, but he broke the momentum. He had Benavidez out of sort a little bit with it. You could tell he was frustrated. I think Bayless did a horrible job. I think that he should be reviewed. And I don't care how good he's been in other fights. I think he was terrible.
I mean, I don't think he should be renewed. His license should get pulled.
Jack, they have to look. Jack, that was it. That you couldn't be more incompetent than that. He ripped off the fans, and he didn't give Benavidez his best chance. Every time the action was going, he stopped it, and or Plant stopped it to buy time, and the referee let him do it.
Frank, what's the difference between what Muhammad Ali did in a rematch with Joe Frazier? He hit him a couple of times, hold him. Hit him a couple of times, hold him.
Jack, he grabbed him around the neck and he pulled him in.
More than Plant was.
Plant held more than an offensive lineman trying to block Reggie White. I think, Jack, I think it was terrible. And the fact that we're talking about it after the fight shows you how bad it was. And after the fight, Jack, that's all everybody talked about.
Bayless didn't.
Is your buddy and you don't want to rip him. I get it.
I'm playing devil's advocate about Kenny Bayless now. But what was he supposed to do? He could take away definitely 1 point, 2 points.
Jack, he warns him, and then he takes a point away. And then if he does it again, he takes another point to get away. And if he does it again, you disqualify him.
You really think in a big fight like this, because of holding a number of times, they're going to pull the plug on the fighter referee?
I don't think Plant should have been disqualified, Jack, but I think it should have been addressed.
If a fighter to get disqualified in a fight this big, it would have to be like Bo Galata constantly hitting a guy in the groin, intentionally, obviously intentionally.
Or Tyson biting Holyfield's ear. I get it.
Not for this holding. I couldn't see.
But Jack, my point is this. If he would have warned him and said, I'm going to start deducting points in a fight now that you're losing, you might be a little less apt to do it. I just think it's a tool that referees have, and he should have used it, and he didn't, and he had a horrible job, and I don't want to see him in a big fight again for a while.
Well, I just want one last comment on that. shouldn't it be up to the judges seeing the excessive holding for them to score the round accordingly? Saying, okay, Plant can hold like that. We can't expect the ref to do this or that. But myself as a judge, I'm not scoring the round for him. Kind of like when I scored for Ali over Jimmy Young, because Ali kept sticking. Jimmy Young kept sticking his head outside the ropes. So I said, as a judge, an unofficial judge, screw this. He's avoiding getting hit by doing it. I don't think it's so cute. He's avoiding an attack illegally.
But Jack,
I scored rounds for Ali that other people didn't.
There were a couple rounds that were close in that fight early, or no, like maybe 5th round, 6th round, where they were close, but I gave it to Benavidez because I penalized him, Plant, for holding. But it's the same thing. What if in the 8th?
Should have done what you did, and maybe they did.
Jack, what about in the 8th round or the 9th round when Benavidez was working Plant over from pillar to post? What if Plant lands a fluke punch and drops him for a second? Is that a 10-8 round for Plant?
No, absolutely not. It's ridiculous the way.
But a judge could score a 10-8 and he's not going to get in trouble.
Frank, I could never figure this out. Okay, one fighter's winning around 10-9. He might get hit with a jab and go down. And now these commentators are saying, oh, it's a 10-8 round. The other way? Are they kidding? So that's actually a 3-point swing, as opposed to a fighter who's winning around 10-9. He gets the flash knockdown. He's only getting credit for 1 extra point.
Right.
And why do they have this 10-8 mentality no matter what? I mean, come on.
Jack, 10 points in a round is too much of a variance anyhow. I like the 5-point better because nobody uses all 10. And that's another conversation, but I don't like the 10-point must scoring system. But at the end of the day, it was a good fight. I think it was worth the money. Both guys came to fight. They showed class at the end, although Benavidez is kind of ripping him a little bit now. I don't like that, but I know he's feeling good about himself. Plant stock didn't get hurt. I think there's a market for Canelo and Benavidez. And again, if Canelo fights Bivol at 175, I don't want to hear anybody say he's ducking Plant. If he fights Bivol and makes it come to 168, then I have a big problem.
You mean ducking Benavidez? First off, Canelo is not going to fight Bivol at 175. You could forget about it. I don't even think he fights Bivol next. But I think it's just talk, his own ego, because he lost to Bivol. And if you ask
who's he fight then?
Canelo's going to say he beat Bivol. Canelo's mentality is, I don't have to fight him again. I beat him last time. I don't care what
he beat. He can't. Jack, he can't say that with a straight face. Nobody believes that.
He says it. He says it. Fighters say it with a straight face all the time. Okay, I mean that's how Canelo basically is. And
well, I haven't heard him say that, but he's a joke if he says it.
Yeah, listen, there was another fight, a WBO cruiserweight fight. Lawrence Okoli beat David Light, 2 unbeaten fighters. Okoli had been with Eddie Hearn. He left him certain disputes. But Okoli is a cruiserweight kind of from the UK to kind of keep an eye on. You know, decent fighter, decent talent.
And that was his first fight in a year.
Yeah, and then so with Okoli, I mean,
I didn't see that.
We'll do on that. Coming up this weekend, I guess the big story is the return of Anthony Joshua. He's fighting Jermaine Franklin. Jermaine Franklin's lost 1 fight, a disputed decision to Dillian White, which isn't as impressive as it sounds, because Dillian
majority decision to Dillian White back in November.
But Dillian White was just a shell of his former self, and it came out when he fought Tyson Fury and went out timidly in that fight. But it's a fair fight for Joshua. Look, he's coming up 2 fights against Usyk. It's a perfect fight. He's fighting a guy who is good enough that if Joshua has a terrible night, he could actually lose the fight. So,
Jack,
yeah.
There's not a lot of video I've seen of Franklin. I watched some, and I will say this. He has a little bit of pop. He lets his hands go. And he's not slow. And he throws combinations. I think Derek James is going to prove to get the best out of Joshua that he has in there. My problem is AJ's psyche scares me. And if by some chance Franklin can buzz him early and put a little seed of doubt in his head, you just don't know what can happen, because looking at Joshua now, I think he's at the point where psychologically he could be vulnerable to anybody that's competent. I think Franklin is competent. He's not afraid to let his hands go, where AJ right now looks to me a little bit of Vlad Klitschko, where he only punched when he felt it was safe. And if you came out and you jumped on him, you could keep him in line and in check, and he wouldn't get too bold, at the onset of the fight.
I think you're underestimating Anthony Joshua's intestinal fortitude, how tough he is mentally. Most people do it because that's a perception they have about Anthony Joshua. But if you look at his history, look at his victory over Klitschko. He had
6 years ago, Jack. He's never been that guy.
Well, let's look at his timeline. Then he gets shocked by Andy Ruiz in equilibrium punch, but he went right back in with Ruiz again. He didn't know.
And Jack, he fought like a thief. He did not fight. He played tag.
He got the win. He fought smartly. And then look what happened with Usyk. He loses to Usyk. He didn't have to fight Usyk to begin with. People don't realize that everyone knew Usyk was at least a serious threat to beat Joshua.
I give him credit for taking the fight.
No, he didn't have to. Unlike the gutless Tyson Fury, Joshua took Usyk on. And then when he loses to Usyk, he goes right back in with him again. No,
Jack, he wanted to redeem himself.
Right, but that shows
that's a fighter. I don't give him a lot of props for that.
Thank you. Give him a lot more props than you would a Tyson Fury.
Jack, his psyche bothers me in a big spot against a guy that's not afraid to let his hands go, that has a little bit of pop. I'm picking Joshua to win, but I'm just telling you this. He has to look impressive. To me, he hasn't looked impressive since the Klitschko fight, which was April 29th, 2017. That's 6 years ago. Okay? Every fight since then, since he's been down. Think about it. Since Klitschko knocked him down, he got up and he won the fight. That's something that Mike Tyson or Lennox Lewis ever did. And after that, I thought, okay, this guy can be the real deal. I had no idea he'd never be that guy again. And he fights, to me, that he looks like he's looking over his shoulder. I don't like guys that fight like that, Jack, but I'll say this. As far as physically, from head to toe, and I said this before on this show, Anthony Joshua's body is capable of beating any other heavyweight in the world. I just don't know if he has the motor to do it. And that scares me.
Well, we'll see. I just want to add one more thing about Joshua. He had signed to fight Tyson Fury, but Tyson Fury had the rematch clause with Deontay Wilder, and Deontay Wilder went to court, and the judge ruled in Deontay Wilder's favor. Otherwise, Fury would have been in with Joshua.
Jack, let me ask you a question. Say Joshua gets Franklin out in 8 rounds, and him and Fury signed the fight, and Fury hasn't fought in the interim. Who are you going to pick?
I don't know. Let him beat Franklin. Let me analyze it. Joshua does have the tools to beat Fury. That doesn't mean I would pick him to beat Fury, because I think Fury's an outstanding big man. But let's see. It's a different fight than fighting Usyk. Fury has tremendous talent, speed. Usyk is better technically, than Fury. That's kind of like a little difference there. No, different fight. It's a much bigger target he would have there too in Tyson Fury. So, and I question Fury's punch resistance to a degree. He's been hurt badly a couple of times by Deontay Wilder. You could say, well, he's a big puncher, But there's been other fights where he barely escaped defeat. Just go to YouTube and watch the last round of his fight with Otto Wallen. And Fury was getting pounded badly.
He was in terrible shape for that fight, Jack. But you're right. But he showed in a big spot, though. He got up from the supposed hardest hitter in the division. And if he didn't have heart or some kind of recuperative powers, he wouldn't have got up 4 times.
Yeah, well, let's just see. And Fury's intestinal fortitude. Or where is he mentally? Okay, now
I know what's going on. What is going on with him and and Usyk?
I'm gonna tell you, I got mad at my buddy Don Majeski. We were having a phone conversation about this, and he kept telling me Usyk should just take whatever he's being offered for the most part. He says, where can Usyk get this money? Take the 30%. And if Usyk beats Fury, give Fury 70% for the rematch. And then he's telling me people don't know who Usyk is, the average person, but everyone knows Tyson Fury. And I say, really? If you walk into Dick's Sporting Goods store, for example, you stop someone over there and ask him, have you heard of the name Tyson Fury? They'd say, who? This isn't the UK. His name doesn't mean anything in America to sports fans for the most part.
I think it does because of Wilder.
Okay. So he's on Wilder's coattails to an extent.
They had 3 really good fights, Jack.
Let me go a step further. Not even the average sports fan, the average person. Let's say, Frank, it's a woman who doesn't follow sports at all in the supermarket. And you said, excuse me, ma'am, I'm just saying a little survey. Can you identify who Mike Tyson is? They go, oh, yeah, the boxer.
Oh, Jack, that's not. You're talking about one of the biggest draws in the history of sports.
They say, oh, he's a member of a band or something.
And you think they know who Usyk is?
No, they wouldn't know who Usyk is. But Fury's not as big as being made out to be.
Okay, Jack, that may be true, but I'll say this. If Tyson Fury lands in JFK Airport and walks through the airport, it's ESPN is going to cover that, and that's going to be news. If Usyk lands at JFK, the only person who's going to recognize him walking through the airport is Vasily Lomachenko if he has to be there.
I agree on that.
Fury's the bigger draw and has more options.
But just think of this for 1 second. Usyk, who has a stronger claim to the heavyweight title than Fury, a stronger claim. Okay?
He has 3 belts, but you tell me all the time they don't mean anything.
Wait. Fury announced his retirement. So Usyk's claim is similar to Joe Frazier's when he fought Ali the first time. So let's just flip-flop. Usyk is in an Ali position. And Ali, to his credit, never seriously claimed he was the champ. Everyone acknowledged for the most part, well, Frazier is the champ. Ali'd say, well, I'm the real champ. But Frazier had more of a hold on that title. That's why it was 50-50, in part. Because if Ali had a stronger hold on the title, Joe never could have gotten that back. But just think of it. Fury's going 70-30 in his favor, and he has home field advantage. Usyk has to go to England, and give up 70-30. That's madness. Just to have to fight in England, it should have been an extra 10% thrown in.
Jack, I have to admit, I am really befuddled by this because I don't know what Tyson Fury could have seen in Alexander Usyk where he would have any type of fear or trepidation to fight him. I do believe Usyk does care more about legacy. I think Fury's more about panache and money. I don't know what the deal is with this. Maybe Fury doesn't think he can get in shape, or at least the shape he has to be. I know his act is wearing old, and I'm tired of it. That is the fight that should happen next, like the Ali Frazier fight in 71. And Jack, neither one of these guys can claim that they are the world heavyweight boxing champion without beating the other. Usyk earned that right, beating AJ twice. Fury has that in his belt, where in the fact that he did end the Klitschko reign and he beat Wilder.
He retired. He said, I'm retired. I'm done boxing on more than one occasion. He's a grown man.
But Jack, how's that different from retiring to getting stripped? Nobody beat you. He wasn't defeated.
Give the Furies a pass. You say, oh, everyone knows the way Tyson Fury is. Tyson's being Tyson.
Jack, the act is getting old. I can't figure it out. The act is getting old. I want to see the fight.
Frank, you are. I think you nailed it this way. That you're completely right. I don't think Fury is scared of Usyk. I think he probably feels he can beat him. Okay, and is confident. That would be my guess. Maybe Fury just doesn't enjoy living the life of a fighter. Going to training camp, he's not into it. But the
That's
money
plausible.
is so great. The acclaim. It's something he does. It's like the guy who doesn't really care for his job, but he stays on the job rather than get another one. He goes into work.
And because he's making good money.
Right. But he could do without it. He's not going to, miss it at all. Believe me, he'd rather not even come into work. And Usyk is the guy who seems to love his job. He wants to advance his company, do this and do that.
Jack, you know what really gets me though? And I try to wash myself of this. But sometimes, whether it's a sports team or a fighter, their fans are so over the top that they push me to the other side. And I have to admit, Usyk's fans, and I call him the Bachelor because everybody wants to date the Bachelor and be around the Bachelor. He's the guy like on the TV show. But his fans, to me, are so over the top. So when I take his fans and then I think about Fury, who I don't really like. I respect him and his ability, but I can't say I'm a Fury fan and I cheer for him. If they fight, I will be so conflicted on who to root for because I know we're going to start hearing best all time, whoever wins. But to me, the Usyk fan.
No. Usyk won't enter the conversation.
Jack, but I'll tell you what, though. They'll say he's one of the 10 greatest.
I just want to say this with the fight not being made. One key point. It's he said, she said behind the scenes. Both
we don't know. Right.
We do know there's something, a very revealing piece of evidence, Frank, that even points more so to this being Fury's fault. And we both know it's Fury's fault. Frank Warren and Bob Arum are Fury's promoters. Those guys have never hesitated throughout their career to rip into the opposition's people, blame them, put them down, saying it's their fault. Frank Warren isn't putting down the Usyk people. He's not bad-mouthing them. Bob Arum isn't bad-mouthing them. Very interesting because they know how reasonable they've been, and they know it's their own guy who's the pain in the butt.
Jack, I can't disagree with that. All I can say is this. I can't read Fury's mind. It seems most obvious that he's the one why we're not getting the fight. I don't believe he's afraid of him or afraid of losing to him. I don't know what it is, but again, maybe.
I want to cut in because they're heavyweights, so they'll always be there for one another. But we talked like this about the Spence Crawford fight a while back. Spence is now announcing he's moving up to junior middleweight. So if is that
official, Jack? Has he said that?
Yeah, he said it. Well, yeah.
So we never have to talk about Spence Crawford again.
Reportedly, that's come out. I haven't heard him say it. But if you're ever going to see him fight Crawford, you're not going to see them fight when they were at their peak, if it ever.
And I see Jermell Charlo, J-E or M-E, is calling out Crawford.
Right, and Crawford's got to get it promoted, which leads us to Dana White indirectly. The Mac and Jack Sports Show, the name of Dana White came up. The talk is, well, he's looking to get into boxing again. And I say stay away. If Dana White was serious about getting into boxing, really serious, and we could safely say Dana White has deep pockets, couldn't we? Very deep pockets. We could say that.
Right.
You know how he could make a splash, Frank? If he came to me, which he never would, and I told him, you've got to make a big splash and make the boxing world take notice. Sign Terrence Crawford, who's a free agent. Give him the big money. But you want to know something? Dana White wouldn't do it because he wouldn't know what to do with Terrence Crawford. You know what Dana White could then do? Get on the phone to Don King, who just signed Adrian Broner, and make the fight.
And make Broner Crawford.
They'll lose their money, but Dana White will get on the map.
Jack, Dana White does not realize that he is the dictator at the UFC. Boxing doesn't run like that. It's completely different. I hate to say it because the guy's made so much money and he's had foresight to see where that sport's going. He'd be in over his head. If he thinks there's sharks in MMA, he has no idea what he'd be facing with, dealing with all the backstabbing, all the things that go on with boxing. And everybody would love him because, oh yeah, the best will fight the best. Baloney, because this guy would be tied with that guy, he would be with that network, and it would never happen.
Unless Dana White is prepared to lose a fortune of money, my prediction is he comes on as a boxing promoter, he'll fall flat on his face completely. A complete dud. I don't think he could hang with the promoter.
Jack, he's smart. I don't think he ever goes down that road. I don't. And before we get on to your favorite part, there's a big fight next weekend. Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia. I know you're picking Garcia.
That's in a month, Frank.
Yeah, next month.
Oh, next month. I thought you said next week.
Yes, in April. And I just saw that the pay-per-view is $84.99. Now, you know I've been getting the fights. I hate to say this because I'll probably make a fool of myself. But right now, if I had to pay for that, I don't think I would do it because, as I said a couple weeks ago, I got to see Chavez and Ramirez, Rosario and Chavez at 135 for free. Both of those guys are better than Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis. And to throw out $85 for that fight, it's just getting ridiculous.
I want to deal with you, Frank. Earlier in the afternoon, at some point in the afternoon of the fight, your wife is going to say, honey, can we go out to dinner tonight? And you're going to say, oh, nah, things are, we're budgeting in, not tonight. And then when she's asleep in the room, you're going to order the fight.
Punch it in.
Pay the $85.
I hope not, Jack.
Getting the fight. It's Tank Davis, one of your favorites, Frank.
Oh, get out of here.
You're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to feel the temptation you're going to be overwhelmed like you are Joe Frazier opponent. The pressure's going to be on you as you're getting closer to fight time. So, Frank, get the show early. Enjoy the undercard.
The only thing, Jack, that makes me think that is so I can talk about it with you. That I want to see it, and I don't like these streams. I never have good luck with them. They're full of viruses. So that's why I just get the fight and just roll with it. But that's a lot of money. If they're going to charge $85 for that, what would they charge if Crawford and Spence fought? $99.99?
Funny, I think it was the 100% Frank on Dana White. I'm the one that said he wouldn't make it in the boxing game. Frank said so too, Joe. But what was I saying? I lost my thought.
Well, that's hard to believe, Jack.
Not important. Tank Davis, the $85.
About you're saying I'm going to get the fight either way.
Yeah, you're going to wind up getting the fight. Either way you look at it. So, but $85, it's alarming. It's a red flag because it went from 75 to 85. I see our
friend Central Scott says Fury's never out of the gym. In fact, didn't Sugar Hill Stewart say he was never been trained? It was he never trained for this fight. He was never in training for this fight.
Listen, maybe Fury is in the gym, but there's a difference between training for fight and just keeping in shape.
But Jack, if you're in the gym and you're keeping in shape, that gives you a leg up on the other guys.
Oh, it does.
Because not everybody's Bernard Hopkins or Marvin Hagler.
Muhammad Ali always used to say he needed 6 weeks of hard training. Even with his long layoff, his attitude was, give me 6 weeks to train hard. Fury had that extra time. He knew there was a possibility of the fight taking place to train all along. he said 70-30 because Usyk in his right mind wouldn't accept 70-30. What an insult. And then Usyk called his bluff. And Frank, immediately when we had glove fist after, I said, the fight's not coming off. I think you agreed with me on that.
Yep. No, we both said that.
Right. We both said I didn't take it seriously that it was going to come off. I don't take Fury seriously.
But, Jack, we're so used to fights not happening. That's an easy bet today. I mean, forget the names Fury and Usyk. You could say that about everything.
Tank and Garcia is happening because Tank is probably going to be going to
has some
jail.
legal problems, right? So there you go.
The question is for how long? And I'm not wishing Tank goes to jail. Let me make that clear. I'm not wishing anything bad and negative on Tank. The judge is going to make, the legal system will make its decision on Tank, whatever it is, and I'm
right
on the outside with that. But
if you had to pick right now, Jack, who would you take, Tank or Garcia?
Originally I picked Garcia. You know what's bothering me about this fight, Frank? We tend to think of past fights and make a comparison. I remember I picked the first fight when Meldrick Taylor fought Julio Cesar Chavez. I picked Meldrick Taylor, okay? Top point Chavez, too quick, too this, too that. Something is bothering me about that fight and picking Garcia. He's kind of my Meldrick Taylor, and Tank is kind of my Julio Cesar Chavez version in that fight. Somehow I could see Garcia fighting great, being up 8-3, dazzling, and Tank hitting him a shot, wobbling him, and the ref quickly stops the fight.
If I have to pick right now, well, I don't see anything changing my mind. I'm going to go with Tank because I actually think he's the overall better fighter. I do think Garcia's length could be a problem, and he can punch, but I just think Tank is the better overall mechanic.
Yeah, and also Tank, though, does sometimes lose rounds. He takes his time. Sometimes he could lose some rounds early, and when he tries to ratchet up a bit against Garcia, maybe Garcia holds him off. So we'll see.
I think he's going to try to get Garcia to overcommit and lunge and extend. I think that's what he's going to try to do. He's going to try to get Garcia to open up so he has some openings. I don't think he's going to carry the fight and try to work him over. I think he's going to try to use Garcia's length against him.
Okay. Well, we're talking about real fights. What about our fantasy fights? We can't.
All right, Jack, did we cover everything? I guess we got it all. Dana White, we both like Joshua to win. We're both probably going to pay for Garcia and Davis. All right.
Well, I think
hypothetical.
They haven't given us that great an undercard. I forgot who's fighting, but I looked at the undercard. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'll give in one time.
All right, Jack. Here's an easy one, I think. James Toney versus Gerald McClellan at 160.
Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, Tony's never been knocked down as a whole. Wait, Tony was knocked down against Roy Jones. Was Tony ever hurt during his career that you can remember? Really in bad.
I don't think I can't remember if I ever saw him shook. And
yeah,
look,
yeah.
I think Sam Peter buzzed him a couple times.
And that's a big, strong, powerful.
Right.
No, Tony's just too good, too much a technician, and he would point McClellan or maybe stop him late, take him apart.
Jack, Tony wasn't. He wasn't. What's the word I want? He wasn't even though he has a good record, he wasn't always stellar at 160. He had a couple bad nights at 160. I think just the skill level of Tony is too much. I think McClellan has the punch. I don't think he knocks him out. He can knock Tony out. I think McClellan starts fast, carries a fight. Tony counters him, takes a decision from him. Tony's no life taker. McClellan being a southpaw, I don't think really is a factor. I would take Tony to win by a decision. I think it's competitive for maybe 6 or 7 rounds again. Tony wasn't virtuous at middleweight, but he has enough skill and enough pop to keep McClellan honest. I think Tony outboxes him.
Well, our producer, Mac, was watching. He told me the other day tapes of Julian Jackson, who was around that weight, who fought McClellan and got stopped. So Mac would try, our guy Mac loves Julian the Hawk Jackson, by the way.
Julian Jackson had an unbelievable career, has some big knockout wins, but he didn't beat McClellan. He didn't beat McCallum. I'm not sure he would have beat Mugabe. He definitely wouldn't have beat Hagler if he moved up to 160. But
Not
yes,
Terry Norris out quick. Yeah.
he did. He did. Norris didn't have the greatest chin, though.
No, he didn't. Not at all.
But he did ice him. All right, Jack, we agree. Tony stops McCallum.
No,
Michael Spinks.
McClellan.
McClellan. Tony decisions McClellan.
Yeah, or maybe a late round stoppage. I'll lean a little towards a decision.
I say decision. All right, we're going to stay in the middle. I'm sorry, Jack. We're going to go the light heavyweight now. Michael Spinks versus Roy Jones. 175.
We're talking about light heavyweight. Are we talking about Jones at his absolute peak? All cylinders running? Is that what we're talking
at 175?
Yeah, but when was Jones at his peak? Was he really at his peak at 175?
I would think maybe 168 was his best.
Yeah,
but at 175, really, who came close to beating him other than Tarver? And that was after he came back down.
At the end of his career. Now, the Jones that beat Tarver the first time in their first fight, I thought that was a fair decision given to Jones. That Roy Jones would have lost to Michael Spinks at light heavyweight. Okay?
I thought Jones pulled that fight out in the 12th round, just for the record.
Right, I agree. But the point is, Jones, if he can bring up to light heavyweight what he had at middleweight against James Toney, you see, we're kind of prorating. Let me go a step further. The Jones at middleweight, who beat James Toney completely, basically shut
that was a 168.
That at 168, I'm sorry, super middleweight. That Roy Jones as a super middleweight would have beaten, and I hate saying this because I do like Michael Spinks a heck of a lot. He's a terrific individual and a great fighter. Would have defeated the light heavyweight version of Michael Spinks and did it with a little room to spare.
Jack, go to the lost and found because maybe they have something there for you because you've lost your senses.
Jones never won. One thing Jones never.
And give me the guy he fought, Jack, that was in Spinks's league. Jack. Give me the guy that Roy Jones fought who was 6'2.5", that could jab, move, counter, had speed, had dynamite in his hands, had a chin, had stamina, could fight 15 rounds. Give me that guy that Jones fought that qualifies to be in Michael Spinks' class. You can't because he doesn't exist.
And name someone that Michael Spinks fought who was in Roy Jones's class when he was a light heavyweight.
Jack, as far as speed, no, but he fought skilled guys. He fought a skilled guy in Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, who is not the boxer Roy Jones was, but who could box and punch and bring it for 15 rounds when he wanted to.
A nice man, a very nice man, tremendous skills, a lazy, unmotivated fighter at times in the later rounds.
I would take Eddie Mustafa over Roy at 175.
I mean, we have a difference of opinion there. I think you forgot how great Roy Jones was at his absolute
best.
I
know. Jack, he's one of the most gifted fighters I've ever seen.
Roy Jones, throughout his career, until he was past his peak, he lost less rounds than we have fingers on our hands.
And, Jack, what would happen if Michael Spinks fought every guy Roy Jones fought at 168 or 175?
It depends.
I'll wait.
Listen, how do we know that Mike Spinks would have beaten James Toney if he fought him at 168?
How do I know that? I know this much. He outboxed Larry Holmes at 170 at heavyweight, so I know he is not in over his head against a great boxer.
Michael Spinks won a disputed decision the second fight against Larry Holmes. He probably shouldn't have gotten that decision.
Not the second time. The first time he clearly won.
Okay. Now, you're going to laugh before you cut in. Look what Roy Jones, a little guy, did. He moved up to heavyweight. He dominated John Ruiz. And you're going to laugh, oh, how do you compare John Ruiz to Larry Holmes? Well, how do you compare John Ruiz to Evander Holyfield, who John Ruiz had a lot of success against?
Jack, that was Holyfield in 2001, 2002. That's 6 or 7 years past his best days. Come on. I can't go there. Mike, what would Michael Spinks have done with John Ruiz? Michael Spinks, here's my case. If Roy doesn't try to mix it with Michael Spinks, he goes the distance and loses a decision. He will have no answer for Spinks' jab. And if he tries to counter and come in, he will get met with force and hit like he's never been hit before. And if he tries to mix it with Spinks and they trade, Spinks will take him out. I don't think it's an easy fight. It probably goes the distance because Roy knows if he messes with Spinks, he'll get knocked out. Spinks wins the decision.
Roy Jones, when he was in his prime, there was serious discussion, public discussion, about him fighting Lennox Lewis. And even
how'd that go? Roy knew better.
No. Not at that point. Roy wasn't looking to move up the heavyweight at that particular point. But Lennox Lewis, even Emmanuel Stewart handling Lennox Lewis said, I think we've got Roy in our future. And Lennox Lewis says, I'm going to knock that S off. That means Superman off his chest. But just the idea that they would talk about making.
Well, Jack, they could talk about that with anything. They were talking about Canelo fighting Usyk. It's just talk. It doesn't mean anything. It didn't happen, and it didn't happen for a reason.
Usyk fight, and if it did, Usyk would have to get down to the cruiserweight limit, Canelo said. So
all right, Jack, so who do you like, Spinks or Jones?
I like Jones by decision there.
Over Michael Spinks at 175.
The Jones at 168 at the very top of his game, I think outpoints Michael Spinks.
All right, we have about 3 minutes left. I don't know which one to do, but this one was suggested. It's been done a million times, so let's just do it. It shouldn't take that long. Jack Dempsey versus Joe Louis.
That used to be the fight most people talked about all the time.
We never talked about it before.
No. I listen, two iconic heavyweights. I mean, and no one talks about it anymore. We're bringing it up, but that's all people talk about. The way they talk about Ali and Tyson today.
Right. That was the big fight up until about probably 60 or 65.
Yeah. Well, even past then, I think, for a while.
Okay.
I'm going to say Joe Louis, more ring generalship. Dempsey probably had a little better chin. But, I just see Louis kind of being in control, rough moments. Maybe has to come off the canvas. I could see Dempsey definitely knocking him down. Louis hanging in there. It does it.
So you like...
Listen. You see this kind of Jason Gonzalez. The Jones that beat Vinny Pazienza and John Ruiz, to me, was unbeatable.
Until he was beatable. I got it. Okay.
He was
Spinks never lost until he fought the guy they thought was the greatest heavyweight of all times. That is his only loss, and he fought Tyson in his prime, and it's held against him. Let me get to Louis and Dempsey. I think it comes down to styles, Jack, and I think that aside from George Foreman, Joe Louis is one of the most dangerous guys that has ever held the heavyweight title to carry the fight too. Dempsey can only fight one way. He has to bring it. I think that is bad news for Dempsey. I think Dempsey could come out and rock Louis in the first round. He was a quick starter. But I think Louis, being smart, would actually give ground, let Dempsey come, try to get inside, uppercut him, and counter him. And I think after 6 or 7 rounds of that, I think he would grind Dempsey down. I think that Louis he'd be in peril for the first 3 or 4 rounds, but I just think he's too precision, too complete, too much power, both hands, can put him together. And I think Dempsey bringing the fight to Louis is a problem. Even though Louis said he didn't like guys that crouched and were aggressors, I don't buy that. I think he beats Louis like he would beat Frazier or Tyson.
We're going to talk about more next week, but I kind of agree with you. It would go more rounds than maybe people think, maybe 9, 10 rounds. But I like
If Dempsey wins, Jack, it's quick. It's within 5. If there's a 6th round, exactly. Louis definitely wins the fight.
Exactly. Louis would be in danger in those early rounds.
Absolutely.
Okay, Frank. Good lively debate. You're probably a little ticked off at my Jones prediction over Spinks, but we can revisit.
Jack, call the lost and found. I think they have something for you. Your senses.
Take care. Till next week.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Good night.